it was like, oh, you could hear it was the perfect mix of design and painting and drawing and all of the process oriented nature of photography. So that was really sort of what led me in my direction.
Hi, listeners, and welcome back, everyone, to my little corner of the podcast world to Beyond the Palette. This is Whitney Rosenson, your host and owner of Art Dimensions. Today, I'm super excited to be interviewing an abstract mixed media artist from the ADI roster, Sarah Finucane. Sarah is on the East Coast, and we have just started working together. I'm looking forward to getting to know her better, and for you all too as well. Sarah states, as an artist and designer, I've always marched to the beat of my own drum and relished the challenge of turning nothing into something. I currently work with two distinct approaches, one that is frenetic, spontaneous, and painterly, and another that is methodically designed and planned. The first approach is fueled by feelings and memories. The second approach is inspired by color. Overall, my work is characterized by its wit, edginess, irreverence, rebellion, honesty, and a playful, eclectic, and whimsical range of moods. Hi, Sarah. Welcome to Beyond the Palette.
Hi, Whitney. I'm just so psyched to be here. Thank
Good.
you.
How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. It's unseasonably warm on the East Coast, so I'm kind of enjoying 60 degrees in January.
Very nice. I wish I could say the same for Los Angeles. But thank you for guesting today and for welcoming all of us into your creative world. I really appreciate it. Okay, let's dive in. Okay, for those listeners who don't know who you are, can you briefly explain your journey to where you are today?
I guess I'd start with I've always been drawn to artistic pursuits. In high school, I got really into fine art and drawing and painting, and then that sort of segued into photography, and I built a darkroom in my basement, and then I was missing classes in high school and going to the local arts guild to take sculpture classes and more drawing classes. After graduating high school, I started taking some classes at Parsons, but in all honesty, I really wasn't ready for college yet. Headed off to Europe to do a fashion photography internship in Milan and study Italian for about a half a year, and then travel all over Europe, and still wasn't ready for college. So then I got on a sailboat and sailed from Maine up into Canada, and I finally returned to Parsons after that sailing experience, and decided I was going to commit to college finally. And I was in New York City. This was before things were online, of course, and I was in New York City, and I was heading up the elevator to go to the registrar's office, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go check out that school in Savannah. And I pretty much hopped on I-95 and drove down there.
So that was Savannah
College of Art and Design, yeah. And it was like spontaneous decisions. Big decisions have always worked well for me. So I moved there and had a wonderful experience in college, and I chose to focus on photography, and took a printmaking elective, and actually realized that there was sort of a hybrid world in between photography and painting that really just like, it was like, oh, you could hear it was the perfect mix of design and painting and drawing and all of the process oriented nature of photography. So that was really sort of what led me in my direction.
And you were a creative designer. Is that a creative director and product design strategist?
Yes. I started out at the wonderful company doing creative direction and digital advertising for brands like Fiji Water and Palm Wonderful and Get Crackin' Pistachios. And then, I did that for about 10 years. And then I sort of segued more and more towards tech and user experience design and product design. So I've worked on the Meta family of apps, Messenger, Instagram. I've worked on a lot of e-commerce things from Chewy and
Oh,
all
wow.
sorts of stuff. So, yeah.
How does that experience affect your painting or your artist, being an artist now? How does that experience influence that?
That's a great question. It affects it in a number of ways, like, kind of touching on the two styles that I'm currently working with, that very like planned, designed path is totally coming from the design world, and just being very adept at all of the digital tools and things like that. So, I mean, that's one way it influences it. Another way, like, especially from coming from the user experience design world, like your number one consideration is the user. And so I've actually been applying that mindset to the artwork that I'm creating, and like, what do I want the collector to feel? So I'm really trying to be empathetic with considering, like, when you own a painting, it's like you're marrying it. It's like adopting a pet or something. And if you're going to experience that every day, like, what do you want to feel? I guess I am an I'm an inherently positive person, and I would not want to live with a downer.
Your paintings are definitely not down. I mean, they're so bright. Let's talk about some of your favorite materials to work with, because I'm so impressed by the materials that you work with. Will you list some of them for the listeners?
Yeah, my materials these days are mostly acrylic based, but I also incorporate like graphite, oil bars, China markers, and a lot of odd tools and stuff. Like, I've covered lemons in paint and kind of rolled them across the canvas just to like kind of see where this wobbly kind of imperfect circle path, that's just creates a different mark on the canvas, and all sorts of weird stuff. Compasses and laser transfers is definitely a favorite of mine, again, to kind of tie in the graphic design aesthetic and the typography. And
How long were you a creative director, or how long were you in the design world?
20 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how long have you been painting?
I mean, I definitely took a long breather while I was pursuing my design career, but I was painting in college and after college. Back then I used to paint figures and mirror images of themselves, and I used to use oils then too.
Okay, so you've been painting for a long time.
Yeah.
How do your emotions affect your painting?
Sometimes it's so subconscious that I'm maybe not really even that aware of it. But then also it's that, kind of mission that I've sort of identified more recently, that like I want to think about how the collector wants to feel, so that it's not necessarily tied to what I'm feeling. And maybe it is. I don't know. Sometimes there's more subdued colors, and other times they're really kind of like really bold.
So your one approach, the first painterly sort of frenetic approach, is fueled by feelings and memories, but it involves bold color combinations, clean lines, and then the primitive marks made with unconventional tools like lemons and mops. All right, the second approach is inspired by color. Let's talk about that, because I know there are a lot of patterns in your work and bold color and textures. So how do you incorporate all of that into one painting?
Again, going back to the digital tools, like oftentimes I'll find myself stuck on a painting and then I'll, take a photograph of it. And I've made hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of brushes in my iPad application called Procreate. And so I can literally mimic all of I call them my moves.
Oh, very cool.
And so then I can get unstuck by trying out different moves on the iPad and without wrecking the canvas.
That's
So
brilliant.
it's sort of this ongoing process of going from digital to analog and digital to analog.
That's incredible. So it's called Procreate. I'm sure a lot of artists know that. All right. How did you start your career as an artist? How did you start it?
I mean, basically art school. That was really how I got started. And that there was definitely sort of that pivotal moment in, like I think any artist goes through, how am I gonna make money, right? And I waitressed my way through college and I started making like kind of posters for like band nights and stuff like that. So that was when I started doing like the graphic design stuff. And then some customers would be like, would you make a brochure for me? Or would you do a logo for me? Or things like that. And so that was sort of how I got into the design world. And I ultimately chose that path for a while.
That's fantastic. What about your influences? Like, are there any famous or well-known artists that influence your work?
Rauschenberg was like a huge influence back in those days, Robert Rauschenberg, Diebenkorn, Frankenthaler, some other oddball, really like minimal artists that I've always admired, like Barnett Newman. And today it's so different because I'm not really looking back at art history today. I'm looking forward, mostly because of the Instagram community, and there's just so much to be inspired by there.
And as long as you mention that, I just want to mention your Instagram handle, Sarah.Finucane, which is SARAH dot FINUCANE. So you can follow Sarah on Instagram. And we're talking obviously about all of these beautiful paintings. You can see them at artdimensionsonline.com. If you were granted $1 million for an art project, what do you think you would do?
I would definitely upgrade my studio. My studio is it works for me. I'm able to be here with my animals, which I like, but I could definitely use some taller ceilings and more wall space. And I would love to hire an assistant that could help me build canvases, stretch canvases. And then, somebody to help me with all of the marketing.
That's a whole other facet, right?
Yeah, it winds up taking up way more time than I'd like. I'd say 75% of my time winds up going to all of the things. And I, of course, would prefer to be spending my time painting.
Right, of course. The reels that you make or the videos that you make are really fun, and I just want the listeners to know that I'm going to post those on the Art Dimensions Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram at Art Dimensions, and there will be some of Sarah's videos and reels for you to look at, and that shows her whole process and a time-lapsed, is that what you call it? A time-lapsed glimpse into creation of your paintings, which I love. Okay, so people, you can see those, which are great. Quickly off the top of your head, describe your aesthetic in 3 words.
Eclectic, playful, whimsical. Yeah.
Eclectic, playful, and whimsical. Great. That's awesome. And your work is definitely whimsical. I just want people to know the colors are so beautiful. You put, would I just say words in your work, or would I say typography in your work?
Yeah, it's a mix of both. Sometimes they're legible. Most of the time I use like asemic writing, so it's not so the user's not focusing on a word, or, like I'll flip letters around if I'm actually using typography.
Yeah, what sort of effect does that give?
Like, I guess it's kind of occluding it so that it doesn't become too strong of a focal point. Like, I try to use it more as a graphic element. And then if it's handwritten, it's more about, the intent is more about the line work really than a message. But occasionally there is a message too. So I don't know. It's kind of a mix of all of it.
How long does it take you to create one of your paintings? Let's say, not a huge one, but a medium-sized painting. I'm just curious.
It's really counterintuitive, but the smaller pieces take so much longer than the big pieces. I struggle with small works. They're really hard for me.
Why?
They just end up feeling too busy for me. Like I wind up trying to put too much in the small space. So I have to practice making small works a little bit more. I've actually been working on these little tiny 12 by 12s to like exercise that muscle.
That's cool. Are they black and whites, or are you working on those now in your studio, the 12 by 12s?
Yeah, I did post 8 of them. There's another 8 in the works that are currently on my wall, but I call them mini finnies for a reference to my last name, mini finnies. But yeah. They're on my website and on my Instagram. There's some that kind of use like this kind of like fern colored yellow and orange and a mix of grays and stuff. They're a little bit different than my usual stuff. So
All right, I'm going to wrap up a little bit, but I wanted to know, how do you stay motivated to keep creating such beautiful, enticing work?
that's a great question. I don't know. I mean, I think it's just like a personality type. Like I'm just very driven. Like I'm always working on something, and I'm such an introvert. It's like really hard to take me away from it. It's like I just have laser focus, and I don't know, I've just been blessed in that regard. But I mean, I also read a lot. Music is always a great source of inspiration. And then, the community on Instagram, all of these amazing artists that you can kind of see what they're doing, that I find that to be so inspiring. It could be like one tiny little piece of a work that someone has created that like launches into a whole different idea.
So who are some Diebenkorn, Frankenthaler, Rauschenberg, but are there any other artists who are living?
Yeah, I mean, some of the current people that I'm fascinated with, Gary Comarin, Danny Gretcher, just like blows my mind. I'm such a fan of his work. Heather Chantos, Galena Monroe.
Are they on Instagram as well as their
Yep. Jason Hackenworth, his stuff is incredible. He uses a lot of handwritten words, and it's a lot like Gary Comarin's work, but it kind of has like this sort of raunchiness that's really interesting.
How do you spell Comarin?
Komarin, I believe. He's actually another Connecticut artist.
Oh, great.
Who's had quite an amazing career. I don't think he's always been in Connecticut. I'm sure he probably spent most of his career in New York, but
I'll check him out. Before we sign off, is there anything else you want the listeners to know about you?
What I'd love to tell other artists and collectors is that I love feedback. So, if you see something on Instagram, there's always an opportunity to comment, and I love hearing what people perceive and feedback. So, yeah.
That's great. All right. Again, Sarah's Instagram is sarah.finucane, Sarah with an H and then .FINUCANE. Thank you so much, Sarah, for chatting with me today on Beyond the Palette. And everybody, just remember, you've got to see her fabulous paintings on the Art Dimensions website, which is artdimensionsonline.com. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And to Sarah and all of you listening, have a healthy, happy week and happy creating.